At your age, going through hospital care or health attention, what is the state of mind you carry in order to face such situations?
Um, and that is that what is. And that's what I'm going to live with until I die. Okay. I think many people think that death is going to cheat them from something that they want. And
You said not to worry when there is a illness. How do you stop worrying?
worry is something that it occurs only when you are removing yourself from the present moment.
So, do you believe in God?
To the extent God exists, to the extent that people believe God exists,
And do you feel that there has to be a purpose to life?
life in and of itself uh, does not have a special purpose.
So, is religion good or bad?
Uh, when when discrimination becomes a part of the religious belief, then I think it is bad.
You also had reflections on, does the psychic organ exist?
Anatomically, it's a myth.
When we talk about brain, we also now see about psychedelic drugs. What is your perspective on this?
Certainly realize there are people who experience life as a continuing misery, and that their position could be, I will try anything that might help.
Do you think the geriatric counseling helps for older people?
I'm not sure how you train young people to become geriatric counselors.
What is that the upcoming professionals in the field of mental health need to keep in mind when we are developing as professionals in this field of mental health?
Some people come to us and say, I want some of your magic. And we do magic for them.
How's your health now? You went through a surgery, and how's your health now?
Well, I'm feeling very good at this point, Geethan. I just yesterday had a follow-up visit with the oncologist who is managing everything. At the moment, there is no evidence on imaging of any existing cancer remaining. That may or may not be true. Nobody ever really knows. But at least it was good news to hear that they are unable to see anything. And but I feel like I'm back to being reasonably normal at this point.
This is a curious question I have, Bill. At your age, going through hospital care or health attention, what is the state of mind you carry in order to face such situations?
Wow. First of all, I think being a physician, probably my thinking about things are somewhat different. And that is that what is. And that's what I'm going to live with until I die. Okay. And because of that, I don't worry about dying. I know that that eventually happens to all of us. But as long as I'm living, I am committed to enjoying what I can.
That's a beautiful state of mind you talk about, which is helpful to me also. What is. That's a good sentence to hold on to. Thank you for that.
I understand that anybody who is enjoying life does not want to stop their enjoyment. But I think many people think that death is going to cheat them from something that they want. And I don't think that. I have had a very good life. I have nothing that I want to experience that I have not experienced. And I want to enjoy my life from day to day. That's sufficient for me.
That's
Uh,
that's a beautiful state of mind, to mature to that level. Because in India, we have a slogan, a sutra, where it talks about how a mature fruit will fall away from a plant without any difficulty. That's how the death has to be. That's a prayer that you
yes.
just fall out, uh, and without any attachment. So, um, so that is called as Mrityunga mantra, and I could see you living that.
And I think knowing that I've had the privilege of living longer than many people, I just think it's amazing to me that this has happened, that I've lived so long. It's an extra bonus. I remember when I was much younger, my hope was that I would live to the turn of the century, at which time I would have been about 76 years old. That's right. Wow. So from looking at it that way, I've already had a bonus of 20 some years.
So that's nice, and happy you lived long so that I could interview you.
And
um, you said not to worry when there is a illness. How do you stop worrying? How to stop worrying?
how to what?
How to stop worrying?
Oh, well, worry, worry is something that it occurs only when you are removing yourself from the present moment. You don't worry about the present moment. You have to worry about the future or the past, but
Hmm.
not the present moment. So in an absolute sense, you can stop your worrying if you bring yourself to the present moment. There are various techniques for doing that. Uh, for me, the most simple technique for bringing oneself back to the present moment is simply take an object in your hand. I'll just pick up the control for my video and look at it and start describing what I see.
Okay.
And if I start describing what I'm looking at, I no longer am in the past or the future.
Wow.
So um, that that can be a very uh, convenient thing for people to know, especially people who are prone to anxiety about future events.
Such a simple method,
I
because
had, I recall a situation with a client many years ago
Mhm.
who was given to worrying about what's going to happen.
Mm,
And she was to meet with a professor at her
mhm,
school in regard to her academic work. And she
mm,
began to worry about what the professor was going to say. And she
mm.
remembered what I had told her about going back to the present moment. So she looked around and she saw a small colony of ants on the
Mm,
ground. And so she
mhm.
stopped and looked and said, "What are the ants doing?" And she said, "My worry went away."
Wow, wow. Yeah, I think this is beautiful, very simple method, because when we look around something or take something in the hand, I think it activates the senses, or it triggers the senses. and describing it brings the cognition in the here and now. I think this is one way, a very simple way to get in touch with the now. Thank you for this wisdom. So, do you believe in God?
Ah, well, when you use God in the singular like that, my immediate association is to monotheistic beliefs about a singular, what shall I call it, a superhuman cosmic consciousness, or perhaps a human-like something off there someplace in the clouds. It's usually, and um, to the extent God exists, to the extent that people believe God exists, uh, I my personal belief is that gods in general, not just a singular God, but all gods in general, as well as spirits and fairies and demons, are all mythical creations of humans. And and they help people. Those beliefs help people in this sense, that there are mysteries for which there simply are no available answers based on our present state of knowledge. And people are troubled by mysteries. And so they give an answer to the mystery by creating a myth. You begin to see it in children before they have to deal with anything in the nature of God and so forth. Children will always have an explanation for the things they do not understand. And in that sense, we retain that childlike ability to create an answer to the myth or an answer to the mystery when there will never be any answer to the mystery. Like, what is the source of all that exists? For me, it's a mystery, and I accept it as a mystery. It doesn't bother me. I don't have to have an answer for mysteries. I'm curious. I'll investigate things. But if I end up with no answer, it's okay. It can still be a mystery. So, but in general, people who have a firm belief in the existence of a God, I think, are quite well satisfied to have that belief. And so I have to admit, of course, that my belief is my belief purely. And I have no reason to say that my belief is superior to somebody else's belief. It's mine, and other people believe differently, and I cannot say that they are wrong. I might not find their way of looking at things to be useful to me, but it doesn't make it wrong. I have a grandson who is very much involved in evangelical Christianity, and we talk occasionally. He understands my position. I understand his position. One of the mysteries for him is, how can I be the nice kind of person that I am if I don't believe like he does?
That's interesting. So being nice to each other need not depend that we have the same belief.
Yeah.
And do you feel there has to be a purpose to life? What's the purpose of life?
Um, I've thought about that question multiple times, and when I look at things biologically, and the whole thing about life and non-existence of life, and how life appears as a transitional experience of some kind of matter, uh, I've come to the conclusion that life in and of itself uh, does not have a special purpose, although uh, biologically I could say that life might have the purpose of reproducing itself, but that's not very satisfactory. The sense of purpose in some terms of something higher, something more desirable, something uh, special about having a mission and so forth. I personally have come to the conclusion that life itself doesn't have a purpose. And at the same time, I believe it is possible for anybody to create a purpose for themselves. Uh, and and so I believe that I live with purpose, but the purpose that I live with is something I have created.
Okay. So when we have created a purpose, sometimes one gets too attached to the purpose to an extent that creation of purpose itself becomes a stressful experience for them. What is
Yeah.
your reflection on how much to be near to our own purpose and how to also have a distance from it?
Well, um, I would think I have to refer to myself in that way. If I were to describe in a global sense my purpose, it is to relate to other human beings in a way which enhances the quality of life for others. And there, there are kind of two components to that. One is be kind, and the other is to help those who are less fortunate. Um, Now, I'm content with that. And I attribute that sense of purpose to the experience I had within my own original family. Uh, so that being kind and being respectful and helping others who are less fortunate was a high value. Uh, Now, I also accept that there are limits in an absolute sense of how much I can help others. I can I can only help others to the extent that they find what I offer to be helpful. Uh, if they one way or another do not respond to what I think are my offers of help, uh, then I'm content to say this is not the time. I, uh, in that sense, I am not a crusader.
Mm-hmm.
I, I don't want to act in ways that I think are helpful if the other person doesn't find them helpful.
Mm, yeah. Uh, I think this is a beautiful way you said about um, live in such a way it makes a difference, a good quality for other people around you, and also consider the limitations because um, other people may want to take or not the kind offers, um, but it depends on the context and not as a condition.
Um, and I think in that sense, for a child,
Mhm.
it's not particularly easy to learn to think about others.
Mm,
Uh, and I give credit to my family for always emphasizing
mm,
the the meaningfulness of all humans.
mm, mm, mm,
And I think that that probably derives from a combination of two things. First of all, that both of my parents came from a background of rural farming in central United States, where it was still an agricultural economy when they were young. And so there were some people had hard times and some people had good times. And the people who were having good times helped those who were having hard times.
mm,
Um, there, there is real difference in the local culture for people who are in an agricultural economy as
mm.
compared to the modern industrial informational kind of society that we have now.
Mm,
Uh,
mm. I think it's a good essence that your parents also brought in into your life about caring for the other, particularly people who had good time, supported people who had hard time. I think this is.
uh, yeah, it's hard to describe what amounts to the whole package of their parenting.
Mm,
But my parents, for example, believed that children did not benefit from punishment. So as I look back to my childhood, uh, I didn't experience punishment. Now, I may, as a child, thought I was being punished. I don't know.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
but uh, certainly, they very clearly did not believe in the use of any kind of physical assault. Uh, so that I was kind of astonished that I had so many friends whose parents would beat them, things like that. I didn't have that kind of experience. My parents, I think, attempted to have me to talk with me and talk about consequences of what I did that was socially unacceptable. And so I'm sure that my parents set limits on what I could do, but those limits were never reinforced by threat of punishment.
that is, I think, very wise parenting about talking about the consequences and not putting the child through a punishment. So I think this makes a lot of difference. And when you spoke about the purpose of life and um, contributing to other human being, does religion play a good role in this or not? Because many times we see religion also becoming a place for leading to war and fight. And so, is religion good or bad?
Uh, well, uh, thinking about how I want to answer that. Religions, to the extent that they are generally intended to maintain social order and interpersonal relationships that are beneficial. I think to that extent, religions are inherently good. I think that there are times when some people identified as religious leaders abuse the basic tenets of the religion and promote religion in some way um, as a way to discriminate against others. Uh, when discrimination becomes a part of the religious belief, then I think it is bad. So, as I look at people who've been identified as great religious leaders in various societies, they do not use their belief system with the intent of diminishing the significance of others who do not adhere to the same belief.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for example, at least the public pronouncements of the Pope
Mm-hmm.
in the Roman Catholic Church make it very evident from his point of view, with his belief in God, all humans are God's children and deserve and are deserving of love. I don't think he's unique in that way. I think that's been true of many religious leaders. And some persons who may not be described as religious leaders, they may be described even as political leaders, but in some respects, their followers are more like the followers of a religion. I don't know as much as you obviously know about the history of Mahatma Gandhi. Was Gandhi a religious leader?
He's a combination of religious. I wouldn't say he's a religious leader. Maybe he practiced certain principles of religion.
Yes, right. That's the kind of thing that I mean. And here's a person who practices the principles, even though it is not identified as a particular religious sect. And I think there have been many people in the world who functioned in that way. So I think of them as religious leaders, even though they are not identified with a specific named religion. I don't know much about the religion of witches. So I can't comment about all religions, but most of the ones that I know have at least written into their history the value of every life.
So, yeah, so it depends on valuing the principles the religions offering, and not to get carried away with religious leaders and who's right, the egos of that. And
I'm in that I'm not a student of religion as such. I'm puzzled for instance, by expressions I hear like death to the infidels, uh, death to the unfaithful. It troubles me because I don't know if that's really a tenet of the religion or if it's an expression of bad religious leaders.
Yeah, I think it's a gray area. Maybe it's a mystery by itself. But as you said, um, people to be killed or murdered for that, for not having that as faith or whatever the faith they follow. I also feel intense pain when I see or hear to such news. Mm.
But I'll go back to your original question. I do believe that in a general sense, religious worship, religious adherence is beneficial to humans in society.
I also think so. As long as I practice mine and not force that onto anyone else, then I think every religion has some beautiful essence to gain from.
You know, I realize that you live in a country that suffers with significant religious conflict from time to time. And I think, my goodness, isn't there some way that people can understand each other?
The thing for us is in India, there are many religions together. So there are sometimes get into conflict. But if you see the base, I still see the spiritual aspects of our country is connecting people. And there is harmony in managing together because there are many religions here and many gods and many practices. It's a very diverse.
Uh, I think that it also touches on another aspect of humans, and that is um, how humans like privilege.
Mm, mm,
Um, and I suspect that that is biologically rooted.
mm,
The idea that because in an absolute sense, the probability is that privilege equals greater opportunity for survival. Um,
mm. Interesting sentence. Privilege gives more opportunity for survival. And I think that is where every human being is somehow striving to get some privileged position so that
uh,
you can have multiple options of choice.
uh, I'm tempted to digress a bit about about the function of brain and how brain is related to uh, that desire for privilege. If you can conceive of the brain as having a lower brain and a higher brain in an overall sense, the lower brain being that aspect of the brain that is shared with reptiles and amphibians. Uh, and then anatomically, it's associated with uh, the so-called midbrain and the brain stem. They do not have what is called the neocortex or the upper brain. And there's a significant difference in the way those two parts of the brain function. Uh, if you look at reptiles and amphibians, they they do not have friends. They
Mm.
only have enemies. The world exists full of enemies. Okay, and so if I, in an absolute sense, if I don't destroy my enemy destroys me. And that's the way the lower brain tends to function. What I call the higher brain, and I think it's easiest to talk about mammals in that respect, that the higher brain brings into one's life the ability to negotiate collaboration. And alligators do not collaborate. Okay? Mammals collaborate. Some don't do very well, and some do extremely well. But that's right. So there's another aspect to this. What I refer to as the lower brain reacts to stimuli, as does the higher brain, but there is a big difference. A stimulus reaches the lower brain in 100 milliseconds. The stimulus to reach the upper brain takes 200 milliseconds, twice as long. So the immediate reaction to any stimulus is the reaction of the lower brain. Okay. Now, you'll see this in yourself and other human beings in the moment that we call startle. In the moment of startle, you are, for a brief period of time, paralyzed. Okay. You have not acted. All you've done is to, okay. Whether it's a noise or a flash of light, or maybe a sense of something just touched your skin, the lower brain immediately says, "Uh-oh, danger, danger." So that the natural reaction of the lower brain is still everybody is an enemy. With the higher brain, you can make friends as long as they behave as you want them to behave. When a friend behaves like you don't want them to behave, they may become an enemy.
Yeah. And when the friend doesn't behave the way I want to behave, then maybe again the reptilian brain is functioning. If still the upper brain is functioning or able to keep my response intact, then maybe I can talk to my friend, dialogue about it, or find a way to modify behaviors. Is that also a possibility?
Yeah, I think. Actually, I've found it useful in talking with people to explain about the two parts of the brain, and that our tendency is always to be protective of our life. And we need to understand that that's the way we function. And if we understand the way we function, it gives us some additional tools in the upper brain to say, well, maybe he isn't trying to kill me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Here you and I are having a friendly conversation and so forth. But there always exists the possibility that I might say something or you might say something that one of us will react to like, that's a bit offensive. And if it's offensive, uh-oh, now do I have a friend or don't I?
Mm. Mm.
Um,
The last sentence I couldn't grasp. Can you repeat again, Bill?
what's that?
No, the last sentence you said, I couldn't hear. Can you repeat it? You said,
Oh, if you or I said something that one of us interpreted as somehow or other offensive, then immediately there's a question. Uh-oh, is that my enemy?
okay.
Uh, and you see it over and over among humans, how people who have been friends for a long time suddenly no longer want to associate with each other. Uh, we are inherently ready to defend our life always. Always. Well, maybe if the brain no longer is functioning well enough to do that, but even even people who have severe impairment of the function of the higher brain continue to react in ways as though the world is against them. The world is a threat.
Okay. So this also gives me a perspective of being sensitive, because brain is by nature designed that way, to defend, to survive. So it needs time to engage and feel, the brain getting a feeling of, it's okay, the person in front of me is not an enemy, but a person like me who I can respond to, connect with.
I I recall a time when a colleague came to me one day, and somebody that I'd had a friendly relationship with for quite an extended period of time. And the person obviously was very tense and spoke very directly and harshly and said, I want you to know I'm very angry with you. Well, first of all, it was a surprise to me to hear that. But my response to that was, well, that's a very bad thing to do yourself. Obviously, it's my observation that sexual activity for the purpose of achieving an orgasm is an experience that most humans want. Most humans want. There may be some who don't. I don't know. I never really met people. I've met people who denied what they want. But we get to the question of what kind of sexual activities are, I hesitate to use the word normal because I'm not sure that anybody knows what the norm is. But I think I would say generally that if sexual activity between two or more people is intended to achieve orgasm, without harming anybody, without harming the other person or other persons, if there's more than two, then generally I would consider it to be a good experience, a desirable experience. I think that when sexual practices involve harm to one or the other person, then I would classify them as bad in the sense that I think they do not serve the purpose of enhancing the quality of life. Now, probably there are sadists or masochists who would disagree with me and say, well, you don't know, Bill, because you never tried. And I must admit, well, they're right. I never tried. To me, sexual activity is a loving and tender thing. It's not. It's in no way harsh. There's no sharp corners in desirable sex. And I think it's unfortunate that religions sometimes focus on what is good and what's bad about sex. I think that, in a sense, that's not the business of religion. That's a distortion of humans.
I like the word you said about it's about being tender and there are no sharp corners. And as long as it is intended towards orgasm and all are involved in the same purpose, I think it's a beautiful journey. If we anything other than that needs a reconsideration. So that's a understanding I get. Thanks for this.
Yeah, well, I think that anybody who has experienced a joyful orgasm would understand that. I think there may be a part of the population who've never experienced a joyful orgasm. I don't know. Maybe that combination of joyful and orgasm is something that doesn't fit, but for me, it makes a lot of sense. And if the orgasm is not a joyful experience, then I think something needs to be done differently.
Yeah. So I also get a good perspective of your sharing, because I think the orgasm is some way of experiencing intimacy also, and I think that is good. And if it can happen through a sexual activity, why not?
I think that some religious leaders, not all certainly, some religious leaders, because of their own personal concern, associate sex with shame. And that to me is a real distortion. Sex is a normal human experience. And the fact that one may desire such experiences should never be shameful, should be respected.
And many times children go through also when they masturbate for themselves, then they feel guilty about, I have pleasure on my own self. What is your perspective on masturbation as a children growing or an adolescent or even as whatever age they are in? What is your essence you would like to talk about masturbating or masturbation?
Ah, well, um, I think masturbation is extremely common. Uh, I think that uh, parents who have the ability to talk about
Mm,
masturbation with their children certainly should do that. Uh, I think that unfortunately, many parents feel awkward about it
mm,
because nobody talked to them when they were children. So they have no way to
mm,
know how to talk to their own children because they didn't have anybody talking to them. So it takes quite an open parent to say, I'm not sure that I know how to talk about this, but for me to be able to say, for me, masturbation was a lot of fun.
mm, mm. Okay.
I mean,
Mm,
um, it's like most people will not publicly admit that they masturbated,
mm.
right? Because because they don't know who will react negatively.
Mm,
But
mm,
you can be guaranteed that somebody will react negatively
mm,
if you talk about it.
mm, mm, mm,
uh,
mm.
and yet it's pretty much a universal experience.
Yeah.
Uh, all children have their genitals and they want to know what those things are. And then they begin to touch them to find out what they are. And oh, it's amazing. I touch them and they feel good. Maybe if
Mm,
I touch them more, they'll even feel better. And the
mm,
next thing you know, they have the experience of touching in such a way that they experience an orgasm.
mm,
Well, now they understand the secret.
mm, mm, mm. Uh, Okay, so it's such a beautiful permission coming from you to experience oneself, um, to own their own genitals, feel the pleasure associated with it. And one beautiful thing I would like to underline what you said is about parents feeling okay to talk about masturbation as a part of life. And I think that would give a lot of liberation.
I think if a parent said, I'm not sure how to talk about this because when I was a kid, nobody talked about it.
Mhm. Yeah,
But I guess we need to talk about it.
yeah. And you also, post Burnian experience or after burn, you also had reflections on, does the psychic organ exist or not? So, what is your thinking about the psychic organs, which transaction analysis
Well,
is based on?
well, the psychic organ is a creation of Eric Berne. Uh, uh, conceptually, it's it's a beautiful idea that somehow or other there's a compartmentalization, that there's one part that organizes what appears as parent ego state, another that organizes what appears as child ego state, and so forth. Uh, anatomically, it's a myth.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Anatomically, myth.
Hmm.
There's there there is no place within the brain that can be identified as associated with what Berne has described as the psychic organ.
Is it?
Um,
Because some transaction analysts associate the child ego state with the brainstem and the adult with the neocortex. You don't see that way, the
uh, I,
brains.
I think that is that's a distortion. And there's nothing that can put those together. There's absolutely nothing I know of in neuroscience that would justify that association. That's a personal association created for some kind of personal utility, but it is not anatomical. Byrne never made a claim about there being any anatomical structure.
I don't know whether they made a claim, but I think there is a correlation or different perspectives with which they are trying to make sense of the ego states and the brain structure. And it's very important I hear from you, because you are a transaction analyst as well as a physician and a psychiatrist. So to hear from you about the brain structure and not necessary to try to fit in the psychic organs into the brain positionings is also a relief for me. That's the reason I'm clarifying a little more on this.
I'll just have to say, I think I know enough about brain anatomy to say that I cannot see anything that suggests there's evidence that the three so-called psychic organs have some relationship to parts of the brain. I think there's a coming revolution, actually, in the whole idea of what is mind and how is mind associated with brain structure. I'm seeing in the literature related to emotions and feelings and behavior and so forth, I'm seeing a gradual change in looking at it. It has been too simplistic in the past. That's now, at the same time I say that, I know that often as a psychotherapist, I use simplistic explanations with a client because I knew there would be something that would fit their level of understanding, not because I thought it was true, but because I thought that it would satisfy their need for understanding themselves. And my patients did not need to know what I know about brain anatomy.
Yeah, I think this is helping me to continue my reading from the perspective, because one of my teacher also, Dr. Burnschmidt, he told any model is helping to organize an experience. In that way, I see ego state is a good model to organize experience, to see, okay, maybe this is coming from my father, this is coming from myself, but it doesn't need to be a part of the brain. That's what I understand.
Yeah. I've often thought when I talked about lower brain and higher brain, if you look at a newborn infant in the first couple of weeks of life, you'll see pretty much an animal that is still reliant upon lower brain for survival. Children, when first born, do not have any friends.
Mm. Mm, 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 mm,
That from the child's point of view, my friend, there's a source of what I want.
mm, 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 mm,
And if I don't get what I want, I'm going to fight to get what I want.
mm, 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 mm,
But it's subtle, and the beginning of the development of the upper brain is very rapid because children learn some very simplistic kinds of cooperation very, very early.
mm, mm, mm.
So they're prepared to use the abilities of the upper brain when they're born. It's just that they have not had reason to use it.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, I think that is maturation which happens over a period of time. Um, so this is a very interesting experience for me when you said, okay, they are born with the upper part of the brain, but they have not yet found a reason to have friends. So it takes time. Yeah. And when we talk about brain, we also now see about psychedelic drugs. Even now, psychedelic psychotherapy also has come, where psychedelic drugs are used as part of therapy or part of creating different experience. And there is also another side where people say, don't try it, you may become addicted to it. There is one more side which says, try it, it's an experience to see how the consciousness is getting altered or how the brain functions. What is your perspective on this, Bill?
Well, first, I have never personally experienced the effects of a psychedelic substance.
Mhm.
Second, I have never had the occasion to be working with someone where I prescribed
Mm,
such a substance to know about
mhm,
actions. So you could say that I'm rather naive in regard to psychedelic substances. I am, however, able to uh, read a lot about them. And I live in a country where um, there's been considerable information available about what is known as ayahuasca,
yeah.
and which was used as part of a religious ceremony among native uh, Brazilians. Um, uh, I, I think the native Brazilians, in their original use of such a thing, were were astonished by the experience. And because um, more primitive groups always have some kind of shaman
Mm,
or medicine man or somebody, uh, and that person's distinction is they are familiar with what other people don't understand.
mm, mm,
Okay. So in most instances, the shaman took control of those unusual experiences.
mm,
And so it's quite apparent with psychedelic substances that some people have some amazing experiences, which in fact are life changing
mm,
in terms of their personality. Their
mm,
personality changes, in
mm,
fact,
mm,
as a result. There
mm,
have also been some people who die
mm, mm,
with the use of a psychedelic substance.
mm, mm.
Um, and the, there is no way to look at a given person and say, you're the kind that will die and you're the kind whose life will change. Um, so um, I'm kind of I'm watchfully waiting to see what the results are of more controlled observations of the response to psychedelic substances and whether there is any ability to predict the possibility of bad or beneficial result from it.
Mhm.
I have known one person who I believe made a significant personality change as a result of the use of ayahuasca here in Brazil. But the person will not admit to having used it.
Mm.
But I know from many discussions about what's interesting in the world, I'm I'm quite well convinced that in fact the person used it. And I think that he is a much better person in this world as a result.
Mm.
So I cannot say that they are inherently bad because I think I've seen one instance at least of a person who certainly had beneficial results.
Mm.
Uh, at the same time, if you ask me, well, Bill, would you take a dose of that? And I would say, absolutely not.
Mm. Mm.
For me, uh, the risk is greater
Mm.
than I'm willing to take. I
Mm.
cannot say that the risk is greater than some of the benefits,
Mm.
but the risk is really more than I'm willing to take. I'm I'm content with what I experience in life, so I'm not looking for something else.
I think that's very important. That one being content in the experience of life. Because when experiments are made out of the contentment, even if an experiment is made, I think it is manageable. But if the experiments on particularly the psychedelic substance are done to avoid something which is happening inside or not to want to contact with some inner traumas or something, then I think it creates a distance between the self itself and robs away the capacity to be in contact with
Uh,
oneself.
I certainly realize there are people who experience life as a continuing misery.
Mm,
I know that that happened, and I
mm,
can understand that under those circumstances, a person often feels desperate for
mm,
some kind of relief from
mm,
their misery, uh, and that their position could be, I will try anything that might
mm,
help.
mm,
Um, and I'd like to think that psychotherapy would be something that they would try, but there's never going to be enough psychotherapists to do that. So I certainly I don't think it's bad for people to decide to experience the use of a psychedelic drug to see if it relieves their misery.
yeah, I think that's a larger question. Even I don't have a direct experience, so we have to just wait and see what comes. Um, um, Another question is, at your age, now if you see there is one specialty which is upcoming in the field of mental health is the geriatric counseling. Do you think the geriatric counseling helps for older people if some counselor goes and talks to them, or most of the elderly people are not even maybe able to talk? So will this geriatric counseling help?
Well, in a general sense, yes, I think it is helpful because as as our societies moved away from the the agricultural orientation. If you look back when we lived in agricultural societies, it was the family that took care of everything. And 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 the effects of aging and so forth were accepted at all levels within the family. So that the aging person did not feel like an outsider. As we moved into the present day society, there's been an increasing focus on youthfulness as being the desirable state. And and you know, that may be okay to think about being more youthful when you're 50, but when you get to be 70, you can't be youthful anymore. It's just not a possibility. And uh, and our society has never done anything to replace what the family originally offered. Now, I speak from the cultures that I'm familiar with. So I don't know that I'm accurately speaking about the culture in India, for instance. And I say that because there have been cultures that more traditionally are highly respectful of the elderly. That I often associate it more with the cultures of China and Southeast Asia. And I don't know enough about India to know whether age veneration is common or uncommon. In the United States, age veneration has kind of disappeared.
When we were young, we still had that kind of absorbing aged people, my grandfather, grandmother, all as part of the family. But now we see the usefulness is taking over, and there are a lot more elderly communities which are formed, and the elderly people are living together in such situations. This is a change which we are going through here culturally. Um, and this geriatric counseling seems to be a requirement. At the same time, even counselors who may be young are not willing to spend time with the geriatric or the elderly people because it's two different generations. Even what to do with them is not clear. So this is a this is something to be explored further, is what I'm looking at.
Well, I think I would endorse geriatric counseling as a very valuable activity for the geriatric people. I'm not sure how you train young people to become geriatric counselors.
Because that's a challenge, isn't it? Because geriatric people cannot be trained now as counselors, so only we can train young people. And for young people to have a geriatric mind understanding has its own challenge. So it's a what is your recommendation? What do you think the young counselors should keep in mind when they are developing themselves to be a geriatric counselors?
Wow. Well, I think probably I would put it this way. with the possible exception of people who have some kind of dementia based on physical changes in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Elderly citizens prefer to find a way to still be a contributing member of their society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, and it's important to endorse their desire to be a contributing member
Mm-hmm.
and to, I suppose, in some way, assist the person in finding ways
Mm-hmm.
that they can make contributions.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when one is making a contribution to their society, there is a sense of meaningfulness for the person.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that desire need to be valued of being a contributing member to the society at whatever the age they are in, even about 70, 80, or 90, or even 100, but there is a need to contribute to the society.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, I have met young people who have very good skills in terms of relating to persons at a much more advanced age. Uh, but I don't know anything about the real background of those people. I don't know what occurred in their background that made it possible to feel like there's a relationship.
Mm, mm, mm.
Uh,
Yeah. I'm hoping to develop a syllabus for geriatric counseling in my institute. We are working towards that. In a couple of years, we are planning to formulate a syllabus and see how this could be um, made a structure. So I am also thinking to run a group therapy possible in an elderly home or a community so that we can understand a small model, a small experiment, recording it, understanding it, and then developing further from there about what could be the requirements the counselor need to keep in mind. So this is in one of my plan I have in my mind.
well, I would certainly encourage you to do that because I think it would be a very valuable service.
Mm, okay. Thank you, Bill. We are coming to the last part of the interview. Is I'm going to give you a minute for you now. Like we are all, I'm in the middle part of the profession now. There are also upcoming professionals in the field of psychotherapy or counseling, even at the age of from 22, 23. Now they are coming into this field. What is that the upcoming professionals in the field of mental health need to keep in mind when we are developing as professionals in this field of mental health? You can give your thoughts, and this could be recorded for them.
Well, first, I'm not sure that we know how to define mental illness. Um, Psychiatry in the United States, uh, being a medical service, tries to define mental illness on the basis of a combination of behavioral symptoms. But that's kind of an artificial diagnosis because the diagnosis does not tell you what the treatment needs to be.
Mm, mm,
Um, and I think what we're now learning, for instance, about the many psychotropic drugs that have been developed is that it's completely unpredictable whether a person with a given set of symptoms will recover in any way as a result of a specific kind of chemical. You cannot separate the individual from the context, and that's part of the difficulty, because behavior relates to the person's perception, and perception can only occur within a context. And if the context is special in some way, then the perception will be special accordingly. And to anybody who's not part of that context, that special perception looks like it's abnormal.
Mm.
Yet, for the context, it is essential. You can see a bit of that if you consider special subculture groups such as the mafia in Italy. Okay. The context for the people who are in the mafia is very different from people who are not in the mafia. And what they do within the mafia may make a lot of sense within the mafia, but it'll be considered criminal by anybody who's not in the mafia. Or if not criminal, it's crazy. So I don't know where things are going to go in the future for those people like myself, perhaps like you, who have chosen to work with what we have in the past called mental illness, and increasingly we're having a hard time defining exactly what it is. And it almost gets back to where we function again like the shaman. Some people come to us and say, I want some of your magic. And we do magic for them.
Okay, so
that may sound terrible for a dedicated professional to say, maybe I'm a magician. But I ask you this, for instance, I've had experiences. I'll refer to one of them in particular. Was a colleague who was not a close associate, known to me, so forth. And it was in some context of a workshop or something that a question came up that I answered in a certain way. And I had no memory of this at all. But I think it must have been in more than 20 years after that experience, I received a communication from that person saying that when you said da da da, I looked at it and that changed my life for the good. How do you explain that?
I'm trying to make sense of it as, yes, there is a magic possible when two people come together.